first thing that we like people to consider is what we call the technical considerations. This is very simply a set of questions that goes along with this idea of, can I learn / can I complete and do the work? So to give a technical example, let's say that you were looking for a job that was doing different types of data visualizations. And common softwares that are used for data visualizations might be Power BI, that's a Microsoft product, and Tableau. And maybe you're like me, where you know a little bit of Microsoft Power BI, but you're also really, really good with tools like Excel and tools like Microsoft SQL. So even though I'm not an expert at Microsoft Power BI, and I'm not an expert at Tableau, I'm really, really confident that I can learn and pick up those skills in, let's say, 30 days with a little bit of mentorship and a little bit of support from a work client. Versus if I were applying to be a master gardener at the Portland Garden Association, not only do I not have any of the skills around gardening, herbology, plants, any of that, but I don't have any of those sort of basic skill levels. Like, I don't know anything about soil. My gardening ability is what you would expect from a third grader who's at a science camp, right? So a big takeaway here from some of these sets of questions is understanding that sometimes it's about, can you complete the work today? But also, do you have the prerequisite skills to be able to learn how to complete the work, let's say like in a month, for example. The second set of considerations, we call them the business considerations. This is really, are you willing to do the work? Because maybe you look at that job that I just mentioned, right? This data visualization job. And you're like, okay, cool. I can do the work. I know Power BI. I took a Tableau bootcamp class. I did some Coursera and Udemy learnings. I'm ready to go. I'm willing to do the work. But then you look at the job description and it says, cool, we want someone who can work 80 hours a week. Ooh, I'm not willing to do that. Or maybe it says, we want to go and pay this person $10,000 a year. Not willing to do that. We want this is going to be a very customer-facing role. You're going to be dealing with lots of external customers, and that's going to give different types of pressures because you are building things for external customers. So you're always dealing with their requirements. For some of us, that's amazing, and that's really interesting and fun. And for others of us, we're like, dealing with a lot of people interaction within the job, that might not be what we're looking for. So these sets of questions are really bucketed around to, like, are you willing to do this type of work for the amount of time it's going to take? And time, that can be number of hours per week. It can also be the type of variability in your schedule. Oftentimes, certain sort of customer service or customer representative jobs, you are sort of working around the customer, versus you might have jobs over in a manufacturing type setting where, like where I work for Intel, where we have different shifts. So some people only work 3 days a week, but they work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at night. They work that graveyard shift. Also, money is a huge kind of consideration. That's not just in terms of total salary, but that's in terms of other benefits. If you're like myself, I've got eye problems. For me, those eye and medical benefits are really, really important. And then again, that people, right? That people part, the customer interaction, the amount that you're going to be dealing with people. Particularly for some of us who might be more so over in the technology phase, some of us want to be and interact and work with people a lot. And some of us want to minimize the amount that we're with people, right? And then this sort of third consideration before I will stop talking and take some wonderful questions from you all. The third consideration we call the culture one, right? And this is kind of after you think like, okay, can I actually do this job? Am I actually willing to do this job? Now you got to think, does this job, does this career, does this role actually energize me? And the things where we tend to go and look at, like whether or not the job or the role is energizing you, sometimes you have to go and look specifically at the industry that you're in, the specific kind of organizational structure that you're working in, and then that kind of team and that management that you're working within. So from the industry standpoint, some industries are known for being really dynamic, right? The technology industry, known for being very dynamic, versus maybe the governmental types of roles and governmental agencies. They tend to be a little bit slower and a lot more stable. For some people, that stability is exactly what they're looking for, and that stability lets them be energized and powerful in other dimensions of their life. For others of us, particularly sometimes those who are maybe don't have kids or are more looking for very specific types of career development and career ambition, they want to be in a fast-moving, fast-turning environment. When you think of the organization or organizational structure, um, within larger and smaller companies, there tends to be a certain culture that comes with a more finance-facing organization, an organization that's maybe more focused on cost and quality, an organization that's really focused on safety, or let's say in the nonprofit realm, this might go and be an organization or a part of that organization that's really focused on people, and maybe there's a part of the organization that's more focused on data and data evaluation, that sort of thing. And then finally, when you go and you think of sort of like the team aspect, and when I think of team, I think of my immediate peers, and then I also think of that relationship between myself and that manager, right? You might go and have a great job that pays you exactly what you want for the exact time commitment you want to give, and then you have a manager that is absolutely terrible and it's just not a good fit, right? Sometimes you got a great manager and a great worker and it's just not a good fit, right? There's personality conflicts, there's professional conflicts, and that can be something else that might choose you, or that you might have to consider when deciding whether or not you take that job or whether or not you take that role. Now, I'm going to actually go and kind of pause here because we just went over like 4 or 5 slides of like kind of deep content. And I want to pause here and give you all a chance to go and to sort of source some questions. And you're free to either come off mute and say them out loud, or you can use the Poll Everywhere app and sort of send in that question anonymously. But I want to give you all some time to sort of send in a few questions for what's on your mind based off of where we are in the workshop right now.
This is Flora, and I just wanted to say the last item that you were saying about culture, and that really resonates for me because I've been interviewing a lot, and it does make a difference to me, the culture and the way that people interact with each other and engage with each other. So I'm not sure if it's a question, but it's something that I look for as the best fit in terms of culture.
And I think one area where that comes up, and this is actually going to be a great segue to this first question that just came in. I think when people are first going and they're thinking about their job search and they like align on the language of like, okay, I want a job that looks like this or sounds like this, they say yes and they're excited. And then they go and they either interview for it, or they do an informational interview with someone who has that job or who has that role. And oftentimes after talking with folks, you either get even more energized, or you say, ooh, maybe I want that role, but I don't want that role with you. And I do think that cultural piece, especially now coming out of a pandemic, where many of us are maybe a little bit more thoughtful about who we want to be interacting with on a day-to-day basis, I can definitely see how that's becoming not just more of a consideration for you, but more a consideration for many folks. And then to kind of go and answer this question directly, what are some of the best ways to assess organizational culture during interviews? You'll see this on the spreadsheet that we have coming up soon, but to answer this very quickly, when you have those opportunities to ask the interviewer questions, you have to ask them questions that are questions about how does that organization or how does that team that you're interviewing for respond on their best day, or sorry, on their worst days. I like to think of it as when I'm in an interview and folks are going and you'll normally hear something like, do you have any questions for us? Or are there any other things that we can answer for you? That is kind of your signal to go and to really pepper and almost reverse the interview and ask your interviewer questions about how does the team respond when they're stressed? How did the team transition from an in-person working environment to a COVID and pandemic working environment? What does the team do when there's a conflict in the team? Or I like to think of it as, how does the team fight? How does the team communicate? How does the team appreciate? How does the team recognize each other? And how does the team deal with major external sources of stress? Normally with that kind of set of questions, which tends to be very, very specific to the teams you're interviewing with or the organization you're interviewing with, that can be a really helpful way to sort of in the moment assess culture. And also it allows your interviewer to go and to tell stories that are maybe a little bit more practical and a little bit less fluffy, right? If you were trying to, let's say, join my small business organization and you're like, what do you like about CMD? And I might give you a very general answer was like, I like how we have a really great culture. That doesn't really help you, doesn't really give you the information you need. But if you went and you said, Alex, can you tell me about CMD's worst day and how you all responded to that, how you all dealt with that situation? Or Alex, tell me about the transition process for when CMD went from in-person live large events to virtual smaller workshops. The story that I tell is going to be much more indicative of our culture and how we deal with stress and how we deal with things in the bad times, and will really inform you of, is that a place where you want to work? Because you're going to have bad days, and you want to know that the place where you're working, the way that they respond is the type of environment you want to be in.